most cultures want the same things. We all want the same thing in life, but certainly the business cultures I've experienced with, engaged with over, some have been very transactional. It's across the boardroom, that's when we do the deal. Others are very relationship focused, and the deal's not really done in the boardroom, it's done over dinner or a few drinks after dinner. This is what your team's looking for. I know whenever I hire people, one of the things I'm looking for is, how is this person going to deal? It's fine when the market's going well, the company's going well, but how are they going to deal with adversity? It's hard to build, but easy to lose. And it takes one action. So I think it's really, really crucial. And again, it comes back to the values of the key leadership. You need to walk the walk, absolutely.
Ivan Gecko acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and future. Today, we're joined by Ron Mitchell, a seasoned commercial and business development leader with more than 25 years' experience spanning government, mining, manufacturing and renewable energy. He's worked at the sharp end of global lithium and EV supply chain, holding senior roles with listed companies worldwide, and has even helped shape the industry as a founding member and inaugural chairman of the Lithium and Cobalt Committee of the London Metal Exchange.
Ron Mitchell, welcome to Hearts and Minds.
Great to be here, David.
Always lovely to see you, Ron. As you know, this podcast is all about inviting experienced executives and board directors to share their experiences and, more importantly, their insights in relation to their leadership journey and how good leadership behaviour impacts on engagement and culture development within a small and mid-tier mining context. I know you and I have known each other for half a dozen years. I've followed your career with interest and really looking forward to getting some insights from you. Before we go there, let's learn a little bit about your backstory. What can you tell us about where you grew up and what was it like at the time?
Yeah, well, I was originally born in Africa. Interestingly, in the lithium space, there's a fair bit happening in the African jurisdiction. So, yeah, born and bred there. A couple of generations, originally British ancestry. So I lived in Zimbabwe, grew up in Zimbabwe for a short period of time, about year eight was when I left. Loved the wildlife there, the big game. I had quite a special childhood, being able to travel around. My parents were very quite active in the outdoors. My father loved fishing and game viewing, so I had some wonderful opportunities to head up to places like Lake Kariba and Victoria Falls, these sort of places. So probably some of my most cherished memories as a child. We moved over to Perth when I was 8 years old, and my father was an accountant by trade, so big country town, Perth, back in 1982, as you can imagine, pre-mining boom. So a lot of kangaroos, far more kangaroos in Perth than there were people, that's for sure. So you grew up, trained here, went to university here, worked for the government in the early days, and then had a great opportunity to head overseas and study. And I took a Japanese government scholarship and headed up to Tokyo, of all places. I fell in love with the people, the culture, the mountains in particular. And I spent a number of years there, studied a master's at one of the national universities on a full government scholarship, which was an incredible opportunity. And then actually enrolled in a PhD, and I was tapped on the shoulder by one of the big one of the largest Japanese trading houses in Mitsubishi to potentially come and work for them. And through various opportunities, I ended up working for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, which was one of the world's largest original equipment manufacturers, specialised in a whole raft of different industries, energy, environment in particular. That was the sector I was working in, and worked in a business development commercial role for about 5 years for that company. So I stayed in Tokyo a lot longer than I anticipated, but it was a wonderful experience.
Well, you met your dear heart wife, didn't you, there? And I know you're a frequent visitor back to Japan.
Yeah, permanent souvenir, as I say, my wife. She's now working at Impex. She's been with the Impex team for quite a significant period, pre-FID on the Ichthys project. So she's on the other side of the fence in oil and gas, and I'm obviously on the clean tech and new energy space. So, some interesting conversations around the dinner table, that's for sure. Yeah.
Interested to go back to your childhood and student days, putting your immediate family aside. Who was the first person that showed that they truly believed in you?
Yeah, it's a good question, David. I've been involved in sport my whole career. I love sport. My kids love sport, both from a player, coaching and administration perspective. So I'd say I was really heavily influenced quite early on by some of my coaches in team sports, and I'm a big believer in team sport. I think some of the synergies and takeaways and learnings and lessons you get from team sport are directly attributable to your career and your professional life. So certainly some of the early coaches I had, I was a pretty rugged defender. I used to play key position. I was relatively tall and played a lot of centre-half back, and I used to get roughed up by some of the forwards when I was playing in football in my earlier years. So good lessons learned, but I had coaches that were tremendously supportive and really valued on-field leadership, which I think is something easier said than done. On-field leaders when you're playing it's hard, particularly if you're in a team that's struggling. So some really wonderful lessons learned, and I had coaches that were incredibly supportive, and that really encouraged me a lot. And hopefully I've got a similar coaching philosophy now when I'm coaching my boys.
Yeah, it's interesting. John Wellborn, who was a guest on this program a few months ago, said something very similar. John being, of course, an ex-Wallaby, but he alluded to the transferability of skills and qualities of good coaches to good business leaders and executives. So you're dead right, and I think in many ways sport is a real leveller for kids. It doesn't matter what background and wealth or ethnicity you might come from. Being part of a sporting team with a good mentor and coach and someone who really cares about developing and realising your skills and potential is so important. Was there an event or realisation in your life, Ron, that proved to be a tipping point in terms of how you thought about yourself and your purpose going forward?
Yeah, I often reflect on my journey professionally, and certainly when I was living and working overseas, that was a great opportunity to understand foreign business cultures, first and foremost, and just to understand and appreciate that we do things differently. It's not right or wrong, it's just different. It's a different approach, a different style. And certainly that is true for business in North Asia in general, whether it be Japan, Korea, China, compared to European business and how we do business in the US and even here in Australia. We have a lot of similarities with our North Asian partners. Certainly one thing that I was deeply affected by in a positive way was the clean energy space. And I was working for Mitsubishi, and we were selling a whole range of renewable energy technology, but also environmental plant control equipment for the oil and gas, fertiliser and electric utility spaces. So I had the opportunity to sort of travel the world into Europe and the US, meeting some very big companies who traditionally have generated power through burning fossil fuels, coal in particular, and more recently in gas, but selling equipment to these companies, huge bits of kit, 200, 300, 400 million pieces of environmental plant control equipment, flue gas desulfurization, selected catalytic removers, big bits of kit that go on the back end of a power station to remove various emissions. And just to understand from a management perspective the reasons they were building out the downstream part of their business, and another part of that was carbon capture and storage. That was another offering we had in the environmental plant team. And understanding that these businesses weren't doing it just because they were being forced by government. It was because they had a concern. They had communities they were dealing with on a daily basis, and they were doing it because they needed to. They understood the world's changing, and they needed to take measures, take steps to ensure that. So if I look at where we're positioned now in terms of electrification of the future, it's a similar story. It's a similar journey. The traditional car makers understand that the status quo for business, how they've been doing things for more than 100 years, is no longer palatable. And they also understand there's an emerging demographic that is going to view consumerism, decision-making when it comes to buying cars in particular in the future, not just cars, other mobility instruments, quite differently. They're not just looking at the purchase price. There's other factors that are affecting their decision-making. So you've probably been immersed in that environmental sector as it related to big industry and understanding that the world was changing. This is going back in the early 2000s. I was having those conversations. So I thought, there's some great opportunities in this space going forward, and it's only going to improve and increase over time.
It seems as though environmental management has been dear to your heart for most of your life. That was your master's degree, wasn't it?
Yeah, originally, technically trained, so that gave me a great foundation, just understanding. But also, obviously, moving directly into business development, so bringing those skills directly into a BD type role internationally was a great opportunity, good experience. So yeah, the environment's still dear to my heart, but I'm a realist as well and understand that, we need a mix of solutions going forward, particularly as it relates to energy. Oil and gas is going to continue to play a really, really important part of our future, as will renewables and other forms of energy.
Yeah. Share something with us, Ron, that not many people know about you.
Probably, I talked about my experience in administration in sport. I had an opportunity quite early on in my career, actually. Whilst I was living in Tokyo, I was quite close with the embassy in Japan. And a lot of the diplomats that lived there, DFAT guys, and believe it or not, there was a football competition.
AFL football?
AFL football competition in Japan. They obviously don't play on large pitches. They typically pick up soccer or rugby pitches. Small season, small teams, 11 aside. But I ended up playing and I was the club president for the local team up in Japan.
What was the team called?
Called the Tokyo-listed.
Wow.
And we had the opportunity to travel around Asia, different tournaments, wonderful opportunity. We were a group, a real mix of backgrounds. There were, a mix of diplomats there obviously playing. There were commercial guys. There were guys up there who were English teaching. So you got to meet some really interesting folks, but the Japanese were pretty heart and soul players. They always say they don't speak much English, but they're very passionate about their sport. So we played a lot of really good Japanese sides, but through that experience, I was living and working in Tokyo back in 2011, March 11, 2011.
It's an ominous year.
Yeah, well, it was. Around the world, there were a number of natural disasters that year, quite early on in that year. Of course, they had the big floods here in Australia, and the big Christchurch earthquake was only about a month before the big one up in Tokyo. I think it's one of the largest ever recorded, so I still recall that day quite vividly.
Followed by a tsunami, if I'm...
Huge tsunami and a bit of a nuclear incident as well at Fukushima. So that combination of events was pretty interesting to live through.
So, Ron, you were actually in Tokyo at the time of the earthquake and the tsunami?
Yeah, I was. I was in a building 26 floors up.
Wow.
And, it was incredible, just being there and experiencing the power of this quake. I'd lived and worked for many years and had experienced a number of earthquakes, but this was quite different.
Tell us more about the experience that when you felt the building shake, presumably on the 26th floor.
Yeah, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Looking outside and just seeing these skyscrapers basically crossing. I mean, they were doing exactly what they were designed to do, and that's move. But the screams in the building, I still remember a lot of people sort of panicking, screaming. We had a procedure to follow. That was to grab your grab-and-go bag and jump under your desk, protect your head, put a helmet on. But it went on for 5 minutes, David. Most of the quakes I've experienced are 5, 10, 15 seconds. This thing went on for over 5 minutes. So we knew it was big. It was in the middle of the afternoon, and I still remember when it stopped. We saw the live feeds that the rest of the world saw of these huge waves rolling into the coast, and then the sheer destruction that happened soon thereafter. And then, of course, 24 hours later, there was an incident at Fukushima, and we kind of lived through that as well. And sort of not knowing what was happening was quite nerve-wracking. But I always had a view that if the Australian diplomats are still in Tokyo, then it's safe. And I kept in quite regular contact with a number of those guys, and they were steadfast. And so we got through. But it was certainly an interesting experience.
I know. I understand the event was recognised at a Brownlow Medal ceremony, and you featured in that.
Yeah, it was. Channel 7 did an amazing piece on local footy clubs. As I said, there were quite a few disasters that year up in Queensland, Victoria, and over in New Zealand. So they put this piece together as part of the Brownlow. Tom Harley, he ran the piece. I got to meet and spend a lot of time with Tom in the build-up to that, and they had us up on stage at the 2011 Brownlow. It was the year Dane Swan won, and my team played in a prelim that year but lost to the Cats. But amazing piece, Channel 7, they paid for us to fly over and go to the prelim final, put us up at Crown for a few nights, and then obviously to be part of the night of nights for football was really special and something I thoroughly enjoyed.
You gave me the heads up a while ago, so I did some research and looked at the YouTube video of that ceremony, and you were on stage there with Tom Harley, and there was a fellow, I think his name was Kaz, a young Japanese man that you might have been the coach of for the Tokyo Goannas, and tell the audience what he did.
Yeah, that was incredible. So Kaz, he actually played for the Japan national team, the Samurais, and he had I think an uncle who passed away in the tsunami. He never recovered his body, unfortunately, and he's a wonderful young man, and Channel 7 paid for him to fly down from Tokyo to be on stage at the Brownlow, and they presented him with a football signed by 20-odd Brownlow medalists who were in the room.
Yeah,
we actually all received one of those, and Kaz, he did a funny little skit on stage. He had a Carlton Blues jumper under, and he sort of opened up his Blues jumper to the audience. He's a passionate Blues supporter. Can't speak much English, but that was an incredible experience for him.
Fabulous. What a thrill for him. And I think it was Mike Fitzpatrick that awarded him some sort of trophy with a football, a signed footy.
Got to meet Steve Kernow that night too. He was heavily involved with the Carlton Footy Club, and Chris Judd was on his table. Got to meet Chris and a few of the other Carlton boys there.
That'll be a night he'll never forget, that's for sure, and you as well. And you showed off your impressive Japanese speaking skills. Ron, you've had, across your international career, you've worked for a variety of industries. How do you compare the value of the different experiences you've gained from these different industries and the different places you've worked and lived in?
Yeah, I've had that's a good question. Look, I think ultimately all cultures, the underlying values are the same. They just demonstrate in different ways, and that's due to experience and just different cultures and the way we've been raised differently throughout the world. But yeah, I've been very fortunate, David, to have firstly lived overseas in a culture that's very different to Australia. Although in saying that, there's probably more Australians travelling into Japan these days on ski holidays and other things than ever before. But also been able to travel in some amazing parts of Korea and China, beautiful countries, modern, evolving. Of course, Europe. Some great opportunities, travelled through most of Europe for business, which has been an amazing experience for me, and just seeing, even within the EU, the way different nations do business has been quite fascinating. And then obviously in North America as well, the US and Canada as well. So as I said, I think most cultures want the same things. We all want the same thing in life, but certainly the business cultures I've experienced with, engaged with over, some have been very transactional. It's across the boardroom, that's when we do the deal. Others are very relationship focused, and the deal's not really done in the boardroom, it's done over dinner or a few drinks after dinner. Even I've been in many negotiations that have continued deep into the evening, and you might only cut the deal at midnight while you're into your third or fourth drink, or maybe a few more. But yeah, that's the beauty of international business. It's all very different, very nuanced, but ultimately I think we're all looking for the same thing.
Yeah. When you're not travelling for work and concentrating on business, what do you do to relax?
Oh, got a few hobbies, mainly outdoor focused. Father of two young boys, and they love chasing balls. So yeah, I coach them both in football, heavily involved in basketball as well, just helping them out with training. We love the outdoors, so a bit of boating, a bit of fishing, a bit of snorkelling. I'll take the boys abalone diving with me, which they quite enjoy. So just been outdoors relaxing. My wife also does enjoy it, and we normally get up to Japan once a year for a snowboarding holiday as well in January. It's something I always look forward to. Not quite as fast as I used to be down the mountain, but just getting a lot of enjoyment watching my boys develop and have fun in the snow. So yeah, lots of different activities, but mainly outdoor focused. Yeah, that's where I find.
I've met your two boys. They look very, very active. And where's your favourite ski field in Japan to take them to?
Well, there's a few. As I said, there's a lot of Australians to compete against now. When you head up there, most of the resorts are quite busy with Aussies, which is good. Yeah. Look, obviously having the in-laws in Tokyo, I've got an opportunity to leave all my gear there. So we normally just head out close to Tokyo. There's some really nice places. They get very good snow in sort of mid to late January, which is, I think, the best time to go. But obviously, Nisa Co-op in the north is very popular. Almaty Prefecture in the north of the main island Honshu is very popular. But some of the best spots in Nozo Onsen, Kagura Ski Resort, probably Nagano, Niigata area, which is only about an hour and a half on a bullet train out of Tokyo. So really easy to get to.
Wow. Sounds wonderful. Let's talk about leadership, Ron. A term often overused and sometimes misunderstood. But what are the personal qualities and behaviours that, in your mind, best define effective leadership?
Yeah, I think it starts with integrity. It's arguably the most important quality. I think you need to lead by example in all facets. And there's different ways to demonstrate that, but clearly, and you need to show it early, and you need to show it often. I always think that's a really, really important value that I try and aspire to. I think all the most successful leaders in the past have had integrity as number one. People need to know and trust you, and they're willing to share information and knowing that you have integrity. So I think that's a really important quality. Resilience is probably something else that's really important. I think we all are faced with adversity in different forms throughout our professional and personal lives. It's not so much the issue you're dealing with, it's how you manage it and how you respond to it.
And I guess that would be true particularly in the mining industry where it's heavily market cyclical and fluctuations, commodity prices and project funding and so on. There's often not a lot of certainty ahead.
Well, that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? Commodity cycles and being able to make decisions as the cycle progresses. Being able to make early decisions, I think, is really important. And to do that, you need to be well connected in the sector, have relationships all throughout the value chain, upstream, midstream, downstream, because generally it's not one event that will trigger the next bear cycle or bull cycle. It'll be a number of triggers that will ultimately lead to the positioning of that next cycle. So it's how you respond as a leader, but also not burying your head in the sand and thinking, no, this is different or my commodity is different. I mean, let's face it, all metals behave like commodities ultimately. And as the market becomes more mature, particularly for some of these, I call them new world metals, lithium, battery metals, uranium, some of these others that typically are quite small niche markets, but as they evolve, become more sophisticated, more mature, you'll see these cycles showing high levels of maturity.
Good. So we've got integrity, resilience. Anything else that comes to mind, Ron, in terms of critical leadership behaviours?
Yeah, I think obviously you need to show confidence, and again, that can be really challenging when you're faced with adversity in particular. But you need to portray that in many different ways, and ultimately courage, making tough decisions when you need to. And again, easier said than done, but this is what your team's looking for. I know whenever I hire people, one of the things I'm looking for is, how is this person going to deal? It's fine when the market's going well, the company's going well, but how are they going to deal with adversity? How are they going to respond to a challenge in the workplace, a challenge to the market, something that comes in from left field? And let's face it, it's a metaphor for life. I always say in life, it's never quite as good as it seems it is. And this is true for sport. When it comes to the form line, just when you think your team's going really, really well, be prepared, because it only takes a few injuries, and you're back on the back foot again. So just being prepared and also showing adaptability, I think that's a really important trait for leaders. And again, I love to make the examples in sport coming back to the professional side of life, because there are so many synergies there, and just being ready for change, because change can come quick.
Yeah, it's interesting, all very valid behaviours. I'm reading a book at the moment, Ron. It's called Blind Spotting by Dr. Kirsten Ferguson, and it's very good. She talks about 3 critical behaviours. You've alluded to some of them. The first one is intellectual honesty. In other words, it's important that leaders fess up and acknowledge the fact that they don't know everything and they don't have an answer or a solution to all the problems, and they depend very much on the talents and the skills and the knowledge of other people. That's what leadership's about. So intellectual honesty is very important, and I think the fact that you're showing vulnerability and admitting that you don't have all the answers encourages trust-based relationships with people. The second quality she talks about is curiosity. In other words, the ongoing quest for improvement of self and everything else, and being open to alternative points of view and alternative ways of approaching a problem. And finally, she talks about agility, and you've alluded to that in saying adaptability, I think. Agility is something I'm very mindful of as a recruiter, because I've learned that if you have that elusive quality of learning agility, the ability to be able to make a judgment or make a decision in the context of having incomplete information on a topic, but having the courage and ability to be able to know what to do when you don't really know what to do, that is a rare quality, and I think it's defining of somebody who can achieve really effective leadership and go a long way in their career. It's a constant challenge to be able to pick that up in people, but I really have learned that that's something that we need to concentrate on in leadership. Yeah, so all good qualities, and I think empathy and emotional intelligence. You and I have spoken previously about the importance of being prepared to listen to, understand an alternative point of view, so you know where somebody is positioned emotionally and intellectually is really important. Tell us about some of the key challenges of recent roles that you've had, Ron. What have you learned about yourself and how you've had an impact on people?
Yeah, so if I reflect a little bit, I'll stick with lithium. It's something I've been in for quite some time. Obviously, I've been through 3 different cycles now, bull bear cycles, going back to 2011, which is when I first started my journey at Talison Lithium, which is the world's largest lithium player. Well, the asset in terms of Greenbushes is. It's an interesting joint venture now with American public listed company, an ASX public company, Chinese public company, and a private PTY limited operator. So yeah, really interesting dynamic there, challenging JV, but one that's sitting on the world's best asset, highest grade. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful deposit. But even for the world's best deposit, it's subject to cycles. And obviously having been part of those cycles on a front-facing role in terms of sales and marketing to global markets, technical, chemical grade products, different markets subject to different market conditions, the complexity that surrounded that was often challenging. But again, as you said earlier, talking about agility and the ability to use your team and building teams is really important for that reason, that diversity of thought, particularly when it comes to complex decision making. I think it's easy when the market's in your favour, you've got a commodity price that's running hard in your favour, easy to make the right decision. It's when things go the other way that the challenges come. And that's where you need good people, surround yourself with good people. So that's something I've always had a focus on trying to build is people that have that robustness that are there, that are reliable during the tough times. The cycles itself, that is a challenge building for any mining company, whether you're in production, depending, of course, where you sit on the cost curve. Not everyone wants to sit first quartile, but the reality is there's only a handful of projects typically that'll sit first quartile. It's those companies that are positioned second, third and fourth quartile that come under pressure when the commodity price is challenged. So Ben, also for a junior explorer developer to be able to take your project forward in view of these cycles, because what I've found in lithium, the cycles have been quite short and sharp. You know, we experienced on this last cycle an all-time high in the lithium price, and I refer to spodumene pricing here. There's a number of other metrics you can use, including lithium carbonate, lithium hydroxide. But spodumene being a raw material, it accounts for more than 50% of the world's lithium supply in terms of lithium molecules provided into the market. We saw an all-time high of close to $8,000 a tonne on a spot transaction. Bear in mind, most of the market's trading under contracts, but the spot market is a good indicator as to where the market's going. And then we saw the price crash to less than $1,000 a tonne within a 24-month period. Now that's just a remarkable cycle. But what I think we're going to see from here are cycles that are longer, because what we're seeing now is the investment community is far better educated on the sector, and so are the strategics. So I think there's more maturity coming to the market, which is a good thing. The market is becoming more sophisticated from a pricing perspective. That's probably been one of the biggest unknowns in the sector, is how do we price this thing, because no two ore bodies are the same, and generally no two products are the same. The spodumene concentrate specs vary quite considerably. So how to benchmark your prices based on your product. But there's other things, buyers are looking for. They're looking for security of supply, dependability of supply, and they're looking to source their product from jurisdictions they can know and trust. So probably the cycles that I've seen, some of the challenges in terms of positioning, when to spend, when not to spend, when to pull back, because ultimately any mining project is underpinned from a maiden discovery. If you're lucky enough to make a discovery, then you've then got to de-risk it. You've got to spend a lot of money de-risking a maiden discovery. So you get that initial euphoria of the discovery, the drill bit, announcing that euphoria, generally seeing your share price respond well, but then you've got to go and drill it out and prove you've got an ore body that you can take to market. You've got to spend significant capital on metallurgy. Without the metallurgy, you don't have a project. So metallurgical test work programs can be extensive, they can be expensive, but they're critical, they're important. And then you've got to take it through the approvals pathway as well, and also the technical and commercial study pathways, and they can be incredibly lengthy pathways, and they typically don't tend to track the commodity price cycle. So it's joining all of those things together, David, and being aware of your own company's financial position and how best to take the project forward. So there's a lot of challenges there.
And now we take a short break to acknowledge our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Halo Civil Engineering. Halo is a multidiscipline civil contractor that specialises in the delivery of complex civil projects across defence, infrastructure, energy and resources. A West Australian company committed to delivering dynamic solutions with a focus on zero harm, while having a positive impact on their industry, clients and the people they serve. For more information, search for Halo Civil Engineering on socials or visit halocivil.com.
Is your business ready to amplify its voice? At Podwave Studios, we offer professional video podcast production services that help you connect with clients, build your brand and grow your audience. From corporate messaging to thought leadership, we've got you covered. Book your session at podwavestudios.au today.
As the only executive search and leadership consulting firm to be admitted membership of the Minerals Council of Australia, Ivy & Gecko is uniquely resourced to advocate for the interests of our exploration, project development and mining clients.
Certainly a very complex set of variables to juggle for any CEO or MD of a business. Ron, Australians are really well regarded as good engineers and good project developers and good miners. We're struggling, I think, to establish our reputation as downstream value-adding processors, particularly refiners, including in the lithium space. Do you have any point of view or comments on how Australia can better, how Australia can be better regarded at the value-adding end of the supply chain?
That is a brilliant question, and one I've spent a lot of time considering and engaging with government as well on how do we get better at this. The reality is refining is not mining. So let's just make that very clear from the get-go. It does require a different skill set. It's more process chemistry as opposed to mine engineering. They're two very, very different things. And because we just haven't had those industries here in any sort of quantum, we just haven't been able to generate the expertise here through the university system, and I've got some views on how we can improve that clearly. And the expertise we do have in process engineering, process chemistry is really tied up in the oil and gas sector, who pay well and it's very stable. So trying to prize talent out of that sector into a new up-and-coming emerging market, such as battery metals, for example, is a challenge because a lot of graduates want stability when they exit university. They want to move into a role that's going to pay well, but pay stably. They don't want to go through a really dramatic cycle. We talked about 24 months having a high and a low in lithium. So that's a challenge, first and foremost, is just having the skill set here in country. There's talk about how we can recruit that in and outsource it. Yes, they're all opportunities. But I think we just need some more time to generate the skills here. It can be done. It absolutely can be done. There's no question. But it is a different skill set. So it's just about trying to find the right balance there. And I know we've got a number of downstream lithium projects here in Western Australia that, depending on what you read, have got mixed degrees of success. But I'm sure we're close to getting it right. There is a first mover disadvantage, I believe, in this sector, and we've seen that. But with every disappointment comes learning. And I think that, certainly with the right support, and we do need some support at the government level. I'm not talking about cash handouts, but a bit of support, because our competitors in this space do get a bit of government support. So if we're able to generate a bit of government support, have the expertise, generate the expertise, build the expertise internally here in Australia, there's no reason why we can't be successful. It's not a level playing field when it comes to power and the costs of power, and that's probably one of our biggest challenges. That's an issue for someone far more intelligent than me to resolve, but clearly we pay a lot for our power compared to other jurisdictions, and refining does need power. So I think if we're able to find a solution in that space and build the expertise internally, because we've got some wonderful resources here that we can take downstream, but we just need some more time.
That's right, and I guess if you compare us with the obvious competitor in the downstream space in China, a very different environment, far more mature in its industry, a centralised government. Achieving that scale is hard to conceive that we'll be able to compete with them. But I hope you're right, that we become more effective and more efficient and more reputable in the downstream space in time.
I think just touching on that, we talk about downstream. There's a number of steps, and you take a mineral concentrate into a downstream process. There are opportunities to go not necessarily all the way downstream, because crystallising some of these high-end, I use lithium as an example, or lithium salt, lithium hydroxide, lithium carbonate, is quite challenging, there's no question. The impurities that are required by some of the downstream customers for the application for electric vehicles, for example, are quite severe. But I think there's opportunities for us to go part way. I call it midstream. I don't typically like using that word, but it doesn't need to be a material that is all the way downstream. I think we can take it part of the way down, where we can deal with some of the residues here, some of those non-lithium type byproducts. They can be stored and dealt with here, because that's a big challenge in Europe, for example, a big challenge around permitting, and other jurisdictions as well. So, and that's what some of our miners are looking at through various strategic partnerships.
Let's talk about people and strategy, Ron. Again, I was rereading a classic book. Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great some years ago, and his view of the world is that as a priority, you need to identify the right individuals and sit them in the right seats on the bus, and then work out where to drive the bus. So he's prioritising people and their talents before strategy. Is there merit in that argument, or does he have it the wrong way around?
Yeah, it's a really interesting analogy. I've got a slightly different view. I don't think there is a right or wrong view. It's just, and this has been through a number of, interviewing various candidates for a range of technical, commercial roles over many, many years, and building teams, is you need to kind of sell the vision on where you're going during the interview process to onboard them, particularly in such a competitive market as here in Australia. Competition for talent is tough. Yes. Getting the right people on the bus is tough. So what I have found is people want to know where you're going. What is the vision of your company? What are the values of your company? I often get asked that question during the interview process. Or how do you demonstrate value? So people are looking for parts of that are far more rewarding than just, the financial remuneration. They're looking to work with similar people, aligned values, industries that are rewarding, that they can be proud to tell their parents or their kids about, or their friends. So I think you have to at least understand what the strategy is and communicate that as part of the interview process if you want to get the right talent.
Yeah, well said. And again, as a recruiter, I'm very mindful of the fact that when you're attempting to attract an individual and incite some interest in them about an opportunity, you have to articulate what the value proposition is and the competitive advantage of that particular opportunity versus other alternatives they may have. And surely this is one of the key responsibilities of leadership, is to articulate that vision and unite people in a sense of common purpose towards a common objective, and to provide the environment that enables people to feel as though they belong and they are safe to be able to challenge alternative points of view, even if they come from more senior individuals. And when I'm talking with candidates, those are the sorts of things that I'm very keen to articulate to people.
I spend more time, generally through the recruitment process, there's a lot of people that can do the job, technically trained, have the capability, have the experience, but it's what makes them tick that ultimately counts and gets them the role.
Yeah, that's right. And people generally join companies and they leave bosses. That's my experience. And that brings me to the topic of trust. And I recall listening to an interview with the late Charlie Munger, Charlie being I think he was the vice president of Berkshire Hathaway. And in his final interview at the age of 99, he was asked, during your 70-year business career, what's the most important thing you've learned? And the response was really interesting. Charlie Munger said that the most important thing he's learned is that trust is the most powerful economic force on earth. In other words, he was clearly implying that without trust in partnerships and business relationships, society can't progress, economics can't be realised. Do you have a point of view on this?
Well, I'm not going to argue with such a famous accomplished investor. Look, I don't disagree. I 100% agree that people follow people, and you see it time and time and time again, particularly in a small market like we have here in the mining industry in Australia. And trust, as you said, same on the sporting field. I make the same analogy. It's hard to build, but easy to lose. Only takes one action. So I think it's really, really crucial. And again, it comes back to the values of the key leadership. You need to walk the walk. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's about modelling behaviours that are desirable and that you want to be replicated. It's much like parenting, isn't it? Being a senior executive, a leader of the business is like parenting. It's like being the coach of a kid's footy team. It's about showing the behaviours that are valued and that you want people to replicate. You've been in charge of boards as an executive chairman, Ron. My experience of dealing with boards is that you have a disparate bunch of senior people, usually from different professional disciplines and backgrounds. So importantly, there's a diversity of people. They've all got egos, they've all got opinions and beliefs. As an executive chairman, or indeed as a leader of any business, how do you best encourage each individual to contribute to the overall good of the business? How do you engage with those people?
Yeah, another great question. I think what I can say is that a common understanding of what the vision is and how to achieve it needs to be very, very carefully considered, and you need to really ensure that everyone is on board and understand clearly what that vision is, because I think it's, and again, I'll use an example. I had working with the LME as the chair of the inaugural Lithium Committee. That involved around 12 members, committee members, who are based all around the world, US, Europe, China, Japan, Australia. and all with competing interests, arguably, because they're positioned at different parts of the value chain. Some are right on the upstream as miners, then you've got refiners, you've got battery companies, you've got car makers, and they're all trying to pull in different ways. So, look, the mandate for that particular committee was to promote a cash-settled futures contract to increase price transparency. That can be used as a risk mitigation, a hedging tool by industry. But that was a great example where you had arguably committee members with different interests, but were working for the same objective, and that's to increase transparency in the sector. So look, my style was very much to allow, at each of our committee meetings, allow each of those members to present their view, concerns or otherwise, and then round that out as chair. I don't want to have the first comment because that can often influence how committee members may or may not respond. I would typically round out the conversation. It's true for boards now. I think you're right. You are dealing with very different opinions, different skill sets too. So often board members may be technically trained, they may be commercially trained. So their view on the world is heavily influenced by their background, their own personal experience. But I think as part of the integrity, the noses in, fingers out sort of philosophy as promoted by the Australian Institute of Company Directors, provided each member is working towards the common goal of achieving the vision and the company's example, ASX public company's example, then it can be managed. And clearly being able to moderate a meeting is very, very important as well, because things can get or go down a rabbit warren very, very quickly. So just keeping the meeting, and that's the other challenge with all meetings, is short, sharp meeting is ultimately hard to get to these days. It's a complex world we're living in. There's no question there. So there is complexity there, but the chair's role certainly is to try and ensure that everyone is able to work towards the same objective of achieving that vision.
Yeah. I usually ask our guests what they consider to be the most challenging problems or frustrations in the industry. And very often people say to me it's to do with the length of time and the complexity and the uncertainty of approvals processes. I had Tanya Constable, the CEO of the Minerals Council of Australia, on the program, and she was talking about the need to accelerate the process of approving projects. Apparently something like 1 in 20 projects goes from discovery through to financial investment decision. And obviously there is an impact on the attractiveness for investors to put their money into Australian projects. Just a couple of years ago, Ron, Australia was ranked number 1 globally in terms of the jurisdiction that was most favourable for investment. According to a recent survey, we're now ranked 17th. So how do we reverse that trend and help our upstream projects become the mines of the future?
Yeah, I do recall that was a phrase at the Institute. I used that excerpt in a couple of my public presentations, actually. It's something to be really proud of. Look, yeah, don't disagree. I think, again, there's a lot of competing interests out there in the community, and let's face it, approvals pathways are historically have been challenging here in Australia. There's no question about that. But I think the government, through various associations, AMEC's a wonderful example, Mineral Council another one, that understand the on-the-ground challenges in the sector. And I would say the red tape as it relates to approvals is probably one of the biggest challenges, particularly for the early-stage companies. They can be company killers. You might have cash capital ready to go, ready to get on country, but if you can't get your approvals in place, it can be a real challenge and a laggard on your stock ultimately. But I think the best way to overcome that is through early engagement. I think with approvals, absolutely, engaging native title groups is critical. You need to do that very, very early on and start building that relationship, because it doesn't happen on the schedule that you'd like it to happen. You need to understand that these groups have been on country for many, many years, and They may have other projects as well that are taking up a bit of their time. So building trust and being on country, spending quality time as an executive is really, really important, because the government, it's challenging for them. They're struggling to find good people, just as the mining sector is, to help them out, particularly in that regulatory space. So it's probably one bit of advice I can give for any early stage miner out there is just get on the front foot early, because it doesn't cost a lot of money to build those relationships, but you have to be genuine from the get-go. It doesn't mean you have to go and hire a bunch of people to do it. It's up to the leadership team to again lead from the front and engage early.
What about AI, Ron? The impact of increasingly AI on the mining industry and the pros and cons of it?
Well, AI's two letters a lot of boards are going to be grappled with in the years to come, I'm sure, in various sectors. But mine, look, there's some great opportunities in AI. The precision of decision making can be improved, efficiencies, productivity can increase. But it can have negative impacts too on the culture of an organisation if it's adopted too widely. So one thing I have learnt with technology though is, underestimate it at your peril, because you can't ignore it. It is AI, I think, is game changing in many ways. And I think, as I said, there's many opportunities that we can adopt AI that can benefit companies greatly. But when it comes to extremely widely adopted AI within an organisation, it can have negative consequences too in terms of culture.
Let's unpick that thread a bit. What have you got in mind when you say that?
In terms of the opportunities?
Yeah, in terms of the negative impact on culture of a business.
Well, again, it's just the same goes for automation more broadly within industry. I think the more you automate, the less people you need. So I always say that in life, personality-based roles can't be replaced ultimately. But there's a number of roles out there that can be, through AI in particular. AI now is far more intelligent than it was even a month ago, the way it's improved. And that is the comment about underestimating technology at your peril is so true, because a lot of people, I think, have got their head in the sand just thinking that, well, no, this role can't be replaced by AI, but you'll be very surprised. So I think we just need to be really mindful of, as leaders as well, if we're looking to adopt AI in the workplace, which we all are, we'd be silly if we weren't looking at it, because there's some tremendous financial incentives. And as I said, the decision-making process can be absolutely improved through AI, no question. But again, if you've got your eye on culture and maintaining good people in certain roles, then we need to just be a little bit careful on which roles potentially are replaced or outsourced by AI for sure.
Ron, before we move on to the rapid fire section of the conversation, do you have a question for me?
I do, David. I've known you for many years. This is quite an interesting changing of the guard, moving into, obviously you've authored a really interesting book here, and whilst it's still based on executive search and recruitment, and now you're obviously a podcast presenter. So, what took you down this particular pathway?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Well, I mean, I'm a career recruiter, Ron. I think I've been privileged over the last 35 years or so to be able to work and partner with a lot of people of different backgrounds, largely from the upstream project development and mining industries. I've worked for 3 companies. The first one was Bilby Consulting, which is my father's recruitment business. I was there for a long time, possibly too long. I think I was there for about 27 years in different roles, different places. I worked in the Perth office, the Brisbane office, the Sydney office, and enjoyed the experience. On the sale of that business, I decided that I needed exposure to a different environment. So I went from a very small, privately owned business to a very large, multinational, publicly listed organisation in Corn Ferry. I learned a lot there for 6 or 7 years. Ultimately, I found I was becoming a little bit stifled by the bureaucracy and the hierarchy of what is a big international company. So I thought I'd reinvent myself again and go back to my roots. And we started Ivy and Gecko, my business partner, Alana Bray-White, and now my other colleagues, including David Gallagher and Carol Wilson. So we're all very experienced people. We've got a lot of exposure to mining. What keeps me there and enables me to get up with a spring in my step most mornings is the fact that I'm partnering with such a variety of people. And I really do, I'm a very curious person. I've always enjoyed self-improvement. I thought, I better, unlike most of our competitors who are strictly recruitment, I thought let's add a little bit more value and variety. Let's write a book that was based on research. So a couple of years ago, we took the bold step of interviewing and surveying many, many mid-tier companies and executives to do what no one has done before, really. And that was to tap into their understanding of what a good value proposition represented. And we uncovered some truths, some of which were not all that pleasant for executives to hear based on the surveys we did. And we published all of that in Smart Value. And then we thought, okay, what's another way that we can escape our day jobs and put a bit more entertainment and information to the people that we really appreciate? We thought, let's do a podcast. Again, we're not coming at interviewing people from a technical or a financial or investment point of view, but as HR professionals, we're interested to learn about their insights in relation to leadership and how they engage with people and help build a strong and healthy culture. So we're doing those things, and it keeps us interested. It does add some variety and helps us feel as though we're giving something back to the industry. It's not conducting this podcast and writing our books is not a commercial decision. We're not. It's not a profit-making source for us, but it helps us connect with and get closer to the people that we do business with. So there you go.
Interesting. Yeah.
Thanks for the question. Now, we're running out of time, so let's go through these rapid-fire questions. If you could invite a much admired leader, whether they're deceased or still living, to your home for dinner, who would you invite? And what's the most important question you'd ask them?
Okay. Well, a lot of famous football people I would like to, but I think I came very close a number of years ago to meeting Elon Musk. I was on a Fremont Tesla Gigafactory tour in California. I've been on a couple, and the purchasing manager for Tesla at the time said, let's just go past. Elon's got a desk on the working level floor here. Let's go see. He might be in. I know he's got a flight out tonight. He's always on aeroplanes or planes and trains. Anyway, we swung by his desk. Unfortunately, he'd just left, so I missed my opportunity to meet him and possibly shake hands. But yeah, he'd be a guy who I think is really fascinating. I really admire what he's done. He's a bit of a left field leader.
He's a polarising guy, isn't he?
Very polarising, but you can't argue with his success. He's a visionary. He's dreamt of things that traditional industry just never thought was possible. I'll use the example of a lot of the traditional OEMs just completely underestimate Tesla. Said, this guy, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. This product, no, people aren't going to buy it. And here he is. You don't have to look around West Perth or any city in Australia now, the amount of Teslas that are, and not just Teslas, obviously BYD, a number of other brands are really emerging. So he'd be a guy I'd love to just chat with and just see at what point, this is probably the question I'd love to ask him, at what point did you truly believe that an electric vehicle could be on parity in terms of pricing with a traditional combustion engine vehicle? Because it's fair to say early on they haven't been for a number of years, and he's just had this incredible strategy of rolling out these vehicles. He started with the S, he moved on to the X, the E, and now the Y. So he's got the sexy suite of vehicles, but they've all been designed at a strategy point to increase his cash flow, to allow him to invest in ultimately a lower priced mass production vehicle, which is where he's got it now with the E and the Y.
He's an eccentric genius, it seems to me, who's shown a lot of courage and imagination, and you've got to admire that, despite some of his other antics and foray into politics and so on, which is a bit concerning. But what do you think about his idea that we're to become an interplanetary species? Do you think, another habitat on Mars is something that we'll see or our children will see?
Can you play football on Mars?
You'd kick a long goal.
Yeah, there would need to be a number of very serious scientific breakthroughs to allow us to accomplish that goal, I would have thought. So it's not a yes or a no.
What's a non-fiction book that you've found very valuable?
Yeah, it's a good one. I've read a lot of good books. I really loved the autobiography Mawson on Peter Fitzpatrick, was the author. Just what those guys, those early stage adventurers went through.
Another sportsman that's become an author.
Yes.
Fitzsimmons.
That's a great examples. But look, what those guys went through and accomplished through incredible adversity is it's mind-blowing. And I use my own experiences snowboarding in Japan on a really cold day on top of a mountain just to imagine what those guys went through in the Antarctic during the middle of winter they haven't got Gore-Tex jackets or, beautiful clothing and footwear that we now have, they skins and all sorts of very, very primitive by our standards. So what all those early stage explorers were able to accomplish in the name of science is just truly, truly remarkable.
I often walk into a bookshop, and Fitzsimmons has written quite a few books now, hasn't he? Biographies typically.
Yep.
I always feel slightly intimidated by them because they're such big volumes, most of them anyway. But that's one well worth reading by the sound of it.
And Mawson's one, I couldn't put it down. It was amazing. Number of years now, obviously a biography, apologies, called an autobiography, but phenomenal read, and it's one that is coming out of one of the coldest winters in Perth for quite some time. It's probably one worth reading.
Talking of biographies, the one that I've got on my desk at the moment is a biography of Alexei Navalny, who is or was, prior to his death a couple of years ago, the opposition leader to Putin in Russia. So, there's evidence that Putin had him poisoned in prison, but he's a guy that showed incredible leadership throughout his life in protest to, the authoritarian criminalities of Putin's regime. He left Russia, voluntarily decided to go back to contest Putin in the election, knowing that he'd highly likely be arrested on some trumped-up charge and imprisoned, which he was, and ultimately poisoned. And he did that with a young family back in the West. So an amazing book, that one, Alexei Navalny. What's the best business or career advice you've been given, Ron?
I think just follow your values. We're all born and raised certain ways. We typically, I don't think your values flip and flop throughout life. They're with you from a very early age. So I would say stick to the values that you're aligned with, that make you as a person, and follow those through your career, because I think it's very difficult to flip and flop on your values, absolutely. So follow your values, and that'll hopefully take you somewhere really, really rewarding in life. Yeah,
good advice. What are you most optimistic about?
Look, I think whilst electrification, energy storage, that's a sector I'm really passionate about. It's 16 odd years experience in that sector and watching it evolve to where it is now. I mean, when I first started off, David, in this sector, electrification in terms of lithium demand was 5% of the total market. It was an industrial mineral. So I've seen it basically flip on its head in 15 years, which is a relatively short time frame. This is still early days for this sector. It's still evolving, the technology's improving. So I'm really excited about where this journey can take us as a race of people. I think there's a great opportunity in energy storage as well to bring power to very remote communities and remote mining sites in particular. So, watch your space. I think, 10 years from now, the world's going to look very different, and that's a good thing. It's not just about CO2 emissions. This is about the tailgate emissions, ground zero emissions. I'm talking about tailgate emissions in populated cities. It's becoming a real health issue. So if we can fix that up, to the betterment of our kids and our kids' kids, then that's got to be a good thing.
On the flip side, what's a big risk that we're not paying enough attention to?
Probably some of the red tape in the mining industry. Let's just remember that everything we see and touch in this world is either grown or mined. People often lose sight of that. It's an amazing fact. So understanding that the harder you make it for a mining company, then, it's not only does it affect the country's future wealth by way of royalties and taxation, it just slows, employment opportunities as well. So we just need to find the right balance there. And I know it's challenging. It's a very complex issue, approvals, but certainly the more red tape makes it harder. And some of our competing jurisdictions are doing the opposite. They're stripping down some of that red tape and making it far easier for investment and attracting capital. So it's something we need to just keep an eye on.
Yeah, well said. Do you have a productivity hack or a daily habit that you think would be valuable to other people?
Yeah, I think it's been described previously as the one-touch rule. I think we all in our professional lives are burdened with a lot of email. Anyone who can, some of your podcast listeners, you're getting more than 50, 100, 150 emails a day. That's a lot. It can take up a lot of your time. So the one-touch rule I think is pretty simple. You either do it, you get an incoming email, you delete it or you delegate it. So could call it the 3D rule when it comes to an email. But doing obviously takes a bit more time. There's a bit of toing and froing, but don't procrastinate because it does just help clear the decks. And I think we all know email build-up is one of the biggest challenges we all live with, whether it's a private email account or a professional account. So just getting on top of your email, and that's probably a good one to try and follow.
Yeah, that's good advice. What do you think you should start doing?
Both my boys play a musical instrument, violin and piano, something I never had the opportunity to do, I think, from a young age. I'd love to play a musical instrument. I wouldn't say I'm talented in any way.
Which instrument would you pick up?
I'd love to play the piano. Yeah. I'm a bit too old to pick up the guitar now. I think maybe if you had asked me that question 20 years ago, it might have been the guitar. But piano, I think my boys play it reasonably well, so they can maybe teach me.
And what would you stop doing?
Probably worrying about the small things in life. It's easier said than done. We're all, you're busy, whether you've got a family or not, or professionally, in our private life, we're all so busy and people worry about some really small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Just, move on.
Final question, Ron. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self to help you lead a better quality life?
I think we all need outlets in life. Sport's always been one of mine, the other one being the ocean. So an opportunity to spend more time on the ocean, I think, would be a good thing, and you can either do that by jumping on a surfboard or maybe buying a boat. So,
do you have a boat?
I do have one. I've had one since I was very young, but I think getting a boat and just being able, I find it really calming for me personally. It's a great outlet for me, and you can go and get a feed of fish and spend time with your family as well, so there's other benefits.
Well, good luck in the future, Ron, and hope you have plenty of time there on the ocean enjoying yourself. You've always been very accessible to me, and I appreciate that. And this was an opportunity for our audience to learn a little bit more about you personally as well as professionally. So thanks again for joining Hearts and Mind, and good luck.
My pleasure, David. Great to see you again.
And thanks to Ben Kosterich and the production team at Podwave Studios for making this happen. And if you would like a complimentary copy of our book, Smart Value, please get in touch with me and we'd be happy to provide that. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.